Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Good evening. Welcome to the show. I'm Jeff Barnett. Years ago, House Speaker Tip O'Neill famously said that all politics are local. We're going to be testing that theory tonight by talking with two experts on local politics. Our guest in the second half of the show will be Rob Jackson. Rob is the past president of the Federation of Fairfax County Civic Associations. Rob is on speed dial for every senior elected official from Congress through the Board of Supervisors and county government. He knows exactly what's going on, and we're going to be talking to him about what is going on and where the winds are blowing for decisions over the next year. But in the first part of the show, we'll be talking with Scott Silverthorne, mayor of the city of Fairfax. I first met Scott almost 20 years ago when he and I lived about 3 doors from each other in Fairfax City. He was just reelected to his second term with 74.3% of the vote. So Scott.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Delighted to be here. Thank you.
Why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit about the city of Fairfax and what the mayor does.
Great. Well, the city of Fairfax is in the heart of Northern Virginia. It's in the heart of Fairfax County. At one time, we were the town of Fairfax, and we were the county seat. And then in 1961, we became an independent city under the Virginia Charter. And we have about 24,000 residents, a vibrant community. You used to live there, you know this firsthand. And the mayor is the official or ceremonially official head of city government. So I only cast a vote if there's a tie. I'm not a member of the governing body of the city council. I was at one time. But basically, I chair the council meetings, I set the agenda, and I serve as the ceremonial head of government for all official events and purposes.
But you also have a veto that takes 2/3 to override. Right?
That's correct. And to my knowledge, I have not used the veto, and to my knowledge, a mayor has not vetoed a piece of legislation in the city of Fairfax in over 40 years.
But it's a nice thing to have in your pocket.
It's a nice tool to have. That's correct.
And you also get the princely salary of $6,500 a year for this.
Thanks for reminding me of that. Yes,
well,
it's basically a volunteer job. Let's leave it at that.
For which you're paid like less than minimum wage.
That's correct.
Fairfax City, your number one agenda is economic growth. You have a pretty healthy economy right now. 3.6% is your unemployment rate. So what are you doing for economic growth? What are your pillars for building that?
Well, it's interesting. With the recession, the Great Recession, we suffered along with everyone else. We downsized city government. We tried to keep a lid on things. Housing values decreased, as you know, as they did in most of Northern Virginia. Right. Certainly, the further out you went, we were impacted more by the decreasing housing values. Taxes went up some, but what we're trying to do is say, look, if you're going to have a strong local economy, and if you're going to keep taxes low, you've got to continue to focus on economic development and economic growth. City has a lot of aging shopping centers. The Route 50 Boulevard, or Fairfax Boulevard as it's now called, has a lot of aging infrastructure and commercial strip shopping centers. So my goal is to encourage redevelopment. It's not new development. We're largely built out. In 6.5 square miles, we don't have a lot of room to grow in terms of organic growth. So it's redevelopment is the key.
Now, Paul VI High School, I read a while ago it's going to be moving. And if that happens, I suppose that would open up a big chunk of real estate on Fairfax Boulevard.
It possibly would. I am doing, very candidly, I'm doing everything I can. No mayor likes to see a high school leave, even if it's a private or a parochial school. I think Paul VI is a valued member of our community. I'd like to see them remain in the city. The bottom line is I think they're discovering today what the old Fairfax High School discovered in the late 60s, which is that they've outgrown the campus.
Right. So retail is a growth area for you? And
retail, commercial, office is important, and residential, frankly. There's a lot of interest in residential right now. Multifamily in particular, apartments, as you know, are sort of the flavor of the month. I want to be very cautious on growth issues, and I think my city council is as well. You know, it's one of those things where we don't want to overdo it. We don't want to overreach, and I think it's easy when there's a certain mood in the community or a certain mood in the development community in particular to do something. They all focus on that, but I'm looking out 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and once these decisions are made, you can't reverse them. So it's important that we do it right.
You mentioned taxes, so you brought that up. So let me talk about that just a little bit. You've got a AAA bond rating, so that's great. But you increase taxes. I mean, you know, as a mayor, you know, how do you pull that off? What is your tax rate? How do you set a tax rate that's equitable?
Well, that's a great question, and the reality is that taxes, we have the second now lowest overall real estate tax rate in Northern Virginia. So that's something I'm very proud of. At one time we were the lowest, so they have gone up slightly. But the reality is that I think people want to pay for good services, and the city of Fairfax prides itself on having great community services: trash pickup, snow removal, leaf pickup, great parks
all
and
that's
recreational.
Paid for
through
by
our
your taxes.
By our taxes.
You don't have to.
There's nothing related to Fairfax County in that. This is all city taxes that go for city services.
Yeah, when I moved to Fairfax County, all of a sudden I had to start paying for that.
Right.
It was nice living. That was a nice.
With all due respect
living.
to my friends in the county, you were paying a little bit more than you were in the city.
Right.
So.
You've got a major physical plant, really within your boundaries or adjacent to you, George Mason University. Town-gown relations is always a challenge, I would suppose. So kind of give us, what's your take on what's going on at Mason, and how are you working with the leadership there?
You know, I was very fortunate. When I was elected mayor in 2012, I took office July 1st, and it was the same day that Angel Cabrera took office as president of George Mason University. One of the first things I did was reach out to the new president. I invited him to lunch with the city council, and he accepted immediately. He came to a number of other meetings. We've broken bread, had lunch numerous times. I've actually seen him in our downtown with his family. So he has really made the Fairfax community part of the George Mason community and vice versa. So that part was easy. You know, one of the things that I'm trying to convince people is that we have a world-class university on our border. We need to take advantage of that. The partnership has grown stronger, and I think we have a long way to go. We can grow even stronger in the years ahead.
What's the economic impact of that, though? You know, does it cost you money? Do you make money? I mean, how's that work?
I can't imagine it costs us money. The reality is the Mason folks have actually put out a study in Northern Virginia on the economic impact of the university. I've actually asked them, it would be nice to do a separate, if you could, analysis on the city of Fairfax and their impact on the city. But the overall economic impact is in the billions. So it's really a tremendous amount of generation of revenue, not just in terms of sales tax, but people in terms of payroll. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So, and that trickles down. And by the way, it's not just our campus. It's Loudoun County, it's Arlington County, Prince William County. So the university has become a growing part of Northern Virginia. Now the largest university in Northern Virginia, or excuse me, in Virginia as a whole. Do you get part of the sales tax that's spent on campus at Mason? Not on campus. And technically, Mason is part, it's a convoluted way of doing things, but Mason is sort of right between the county and the city. But the county actually claims them as theirs. We claim them as ours, but I think from a technical standpoint, they are technically in Fairfax County, but they abut the city line. So they're part and parcel of our community. Okay. Your schools are also part and parcel of your community, but they're run by Fairfax County. So how does that work? How do you manage that? We have the best of both worlds. We are an independent city and we provide all of our own services. But where it makes sense to partner with the County of Fairfax, we do so, or with anyone else. So for example, schools is the most obvious one. And we own all of our buildings, but we cut a check through a contractual arrangement to Fairfax County on an annual basis to educate our children. The other areas include the courts, for example, the sheriff's office, the health department. So there's a couple of others. The most recent one, which has been in the news, of course, is that we're partnering with Fairfax Water now to provide water to our residents. That was called the Water Wars. The Water Wars. Right?
So is that now behind us? Is that water over the bridge?
I certainly believe it is. The fact of the matter is that it's not without controversy. There's a lot of folks who were skeptical, remain skeptical, but the reality is a small system. We were continuously getting smaller. At one time, the city water system serviced Herndon, serviced a good part of Reston, a number of other areas, and that footprint was shrinking. So we had a small, economies of scale was kicking in, and it became increasingly difficult, especially with all the new EPA regulations and other regulations that came into place, that we had to make some strategic decisions. And I hope, and I remain optimistic, that this is going to be a long-term benefit to the community. We should expect water rates to equalize with Fairfax County, which are about 50% less than our current rates. We're still paying city rates in about less than 3 years, which is about 2 years away at this point. So when that happens, all city residents and businesses should see a big decrease in their water bills.
Now, there was some opposition to shifting over to Fairfax County, but the way that you described it, it made eminent sense. So where did the opposition come from? Why was that?
I tried to articulate this as best I could during our public outreach meetings and to the press and others. I think a lot of it is civic pride, and I know people kind of cringe when I say that, but the reality is that our forefathers back in the 50s felt it was really important that we had our own independent water system, that we weren't beholden to Fairfax County or others. But we struck a very good deal. We had some help from a federal judge, honestly, that helped us strike this deal. So we think it's in the long-term interest. But that opposition, I think, has largely melted away, and I believe that it will further melt away as they see the equalization of water rates with Fairfax County, which is going to benefit everybody.
Okay. Scott, we've got about a minute before our first break. So you mentioned forefathers. Wasn't your father also the mayor of the city of Fairfax?
He was. When I was growing up, my father first served on the Planning Commission and was chairman of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board in the city, and then was elected to the City Council in 1974 when I was 9, and then elected mayor in 1978. Quite a big election back then. About 4,000 residents turned out, which at the time, for a city of our size, was about 40% of the registered voters, which was a big turnout.
Okay. And you're a graduate of Radford University?
I am, in Fairfax.
Business administration?
Business, marketing, and also a lifelong city resident, and attended Fairfax High School, Sidney Lanier, and Layton Hall Elementary. I'm
Jeff Barnett. We're talking with Scott Silverthorne. We're going to take a small break, and we'll be back in 2 minutes.
I helped turn my child's public school into a whole new kind of school. One with a curriculum that really motivates kids. One that has extended hours, 6 days a week, year-round. With loads of academic, cultural, and recreational activities. One that has support services like medical and dental right there. A school where parents' involvement is encouraged. Where teachers have more time to teach. And students are excited about learning. There's just one problem. My child doesn't ever want to come home. You can help turn your school into a community school for excellence. Find out how. Call 1-877-LOVE-TO-LEARN.
It's coming. Right to your neighborhood. And when it does, you may be surprised. It's your Social Security statement of your benefits, and it's going to help you plan your financial future. Your benefit statement will tell you how much Social Security you're eligible to receive and when you'll get it. Then you'll know how much you need to save for retirement, because that's coming too. The future is in your hands. Choose to save.
The toxic fumes from this meth lab are seeping into Jamie's sinus cavity. Ammonia vapors invade her throat. Toxic gases fill her lungs. Jamie's body is deteriorating. And she doesn't even know it.
Jamie, dinner.
So, who has the drug problem now? Find out how meth affects you at drugfree.org/.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
I needed.
Welcome back. I'm Jeff Barnett. This is the Inside Scoop, and we're talking with the mayor of the city of Fairfax, Scott Silverthorne. Scott, before the break, we had talked a little bit about zoning and antiquated zoning rules. You've got a major initiative. There's going to be some changes for zoning in the city of Fairfax. So what should people expect?
Well, that's again a very important issue for us, and one of the things that I discovered when I became mayor was that we jump through hoops to try to get things approved, and even dealing with multifamily that I mentioned, or certain zoning categories are outdated. So one of the things that I asked the council to support, and we were able to get it through, was a complete rewrite of our zoning ordinances. And the zoning ordinance basically governs everything from FAR and the size and scale of buildings to parking restrictions to landscaping. It deals with everything. It's all encompassing. It's a very large project, and my goal is, and I think I will be successful if people tell me later that it's easier to do business in the city of Fairfax tomorrow than it was yesterday, and that's the key for me. So everything that has to go through, and often a developer will come in and they'll need 14 or 15 or 16 special exceptions to get something approved, and then the public says, well, why is the council granting all these special exceptions? Well, part of it is because some of them just they don't fit in our current zoning code. So
can you give us an example?
Well, my favorite example is, and I was mentioning this to you earlier, is that landscaping, for example. We require landscape parking lots. Well, we had somebody coming in for underground parking, and the landscaping clause kicked in where they would have to landscape an underground parking garage. Well, that makes no sense. Of course not. And it's not the intention of the zoning code to do that. So that's a small nit, but there's lots of them like that. So we hope to clean all that up and hopefully send the message that we want more people to do business in the city of Fairfax.
Now, when people do more, let's pull that string a little bit. When people do more business in the city of Fairfax, they're going to bring more cars. And I'm sure you hear about transportation.
I do.
A lot. So what do you hear? What do you tell people when they complain to you or they pass on to you some of their stories about transportation?
Well, let me sort of pivot a bit on that a little bit. We have done a traffic signal optimization study and found where we had gaps, where we needed improvements, and also found that largely the signals in the city of Fairfax are optimized. Some people may be skeptical of that, but the reality is traffic is a problem all over Northern Virginia. Right. We have a great bus system, our Q bus system, that we partner with George Mason on. We are making major improvements to our intersections as well. Route 50, 123, for example, is underway. Germantown Road area is underway. So those are all things that are really important to help traffic move efficiently through the city of Fairfax. But here's the other piece. This county of Fairfax that surrounds us is going to grow by, some of the numbers are 500,000 people over the next 5 to 10 years. A lot of those folks are going to be living to our west or to our south, Loudon, of course, to our west, and Prince William. So most of that traffic is going to be going to Tyson's or to Washington, D.C., traversing city roads. So the more we can do, including on redevelopment, that includes smart growth principles, frankly, where people may live, shop, eat, and work all in the same complex, makes a lot of sense. And there's a lot of evidence that these sort of the new urbanism that's out there, where you have developments that's not far from here, for example, like right here in Merrifield, that people will actually park their cars and not necessarily, the Mosaic project is what I'm thinking of, that people will not necessarily leave, once they park their cars. And they'll stay and they'll shop, they'll eat, and do multiple things. Right now, if you're in the city of Fairfax and you live, including the old neighborhood where we lived in, you had to drive everywhere, including
right.
to go to the grocery store. So.
Right. But you have an unending problem with 123, 29, and 50, all passing through your little town of 23,000 people.
Well, here's, it's the blessing and the curse. We exist because all roads led to the courthouse. Yeah. And that's why we emerged as a town and we grew out from there. And so, that's the blessing. The curse is, of course, is that all roads lead to the courthouse. So my feeling is look, you manage it the best you can. You encourage people to use alternatives, to get out of their car, take transit, bike, pedestrians, etc. This new development at Fairfax Circle that we just approved recently with 400 units is about a 15-minute walk to the metro. I mean, that's terrific. People can do that. And that's the type of development we want to encourage.
Let's kind of pull that string a little bit more. Housing, homes.
Yes.
Strengthening the home market is one of your flagship initiatives. So talk to us about that. What can the city council and the mayor do to strengthen a home market?
Great question. And here's the thing. People, when they buy a home, not only are they buying a home, they're also buying into a neighborhood. And I believe our neighborhoods need a lot of work. Many of them were built in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And strong neighborhoods, I think, make for stronger communities and overall will make a stronger city of Fairfax. So one of the things that I'm trying to encourage is civic engagement, civic involvement. We have a number of civic associations that are now defunct, and I said this during my campaign and during my swearing-in speech. I'd love to re-energize our community associations, our homeowners associations, etc., to engage in civic affairs. The more people get engaged, the more they're going to feel part of the fabric of the community. The other piece of that that's really important to mention is that about 40% of our population is now ethnically diverse. And when I was growing up, it was about 8%. So it's changing very, very rapidly. We need to get people into the fold. We need people to feel like they're part of the Fairfax community. And I have a task force right now working on diversity. And it doesn't just include ethnic diversity, it's diversity across the board. But I am working with the faith-based community. I'm working with our civic associations. I'm working with interested parties in the city, including the sheriff's office, for example. The county and city there. The Sheriff Kincaid's been engaged with me on this. And so I'm trying to really try to be an inclusive mayor where people feel like they can engage in the city and that the city government will be responsive to them.
Without getting into any names or personalities, what kind of pushback do you get? I mean, when you try to work with people, sometimes they give you the kiss of yes and they don't do anything. I mean, what kind of pushback are you getting?
I can't name names. I can't name names. No, there's always people.
Well, you can, but you got to run for re-election in 2 years.
I know. In all fairness, I haven't gotten a lot of pushback. The city is changing, and not only demographically, as I mentioned, but philosophically in some ways. It was a very different city when I was growing up than it is today. I think people recognize that it's different, and they recognize that we need to do more to be an inclusive community. I have not felt much pushback. There are some who might be part of what I would call, they may not just be as enlightened as to what I'm trying to accomplish. And my goal is to try to spend time with folks like that, tell them why it's important, and hopefully they'll come around to seeing that this is one community and everybody can benefit.
40% minority, that must put a burden on a lot of services, from the police, languages, for example, or sheriff, to the schools. Do you know how much you contribute to Fairfax County Public Schools per pupil?
Yes.
How much is that?
It's roughly, I think the numbers are somewhere about 15,000, 14,500, somewhere in that neighborhood. And
is it the same for elementary and for high school?
It's a per pupil cost. I may be off slightly, and I'm sure our former chairman of our school board, who's now on the city council, will send me a correction if I'm off. But it's a good deal for city residents. If we had to operate our own school system, it would be far more costly. Like the City of Falls Church, which is smaller than we are, they spend a lot of money on schools. The total school percentage of our budget, overall budget, general fund, is about 40%. Most jurisdictions are spending over 50%, so we've got a good deal. And candidly, police, I mean, I take a second to brag, we have a new chief of police, Carl Pardini. He rose through the ranks, started when he was 22 years old, got his master's degree, I believe, from George Mason University. He was our deputy chief most recently, and our crime statistics are phenomenal. We haven't had, knock on wood, a homicide in many years. We have not, our crime rates are now some of the lowest they've been in years. And we've been rated by a recent real estate group in the state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia, as one of the top 10 safest communities in the state. So that's good news.
We've got about 3 minutes left. Open space. So you're trying to grow, you're trying to get more businesses in, you've got to work the roads, and probably there's going to be more circles and widening it. You also want to get more open space. So how do you pull that one off?
Well, back in 2000 and 2002, we had a referendum on the ballot, I don't know if you were still living there at the time, that would actually set aside some money to purchase more park space and open space. With that open space initiative, we were able to build ball fields, we were able to expand leisure parks, if you will, build pocket parks, etc. So we've actually increased our total percentage of park space and open space in the city by over 20% in about 14 years. That's good news. One of the things I'm most proud of, however, is that in our downtown, a flagship park is being built. We are spending a good sum of money, but it's going to be an old town square concept where people can gather. It's going to be large. It's going to be an extension of the old park that's already there, Kitty Posher Garden, so it's going to be quite a bit larger. We're going to have hardscaping. You can provide services there. You can band concerts, weddings. It's going to be a beautiful addition to the city. There's a lot of evidence that parks and open space, especially in downtowns, help create more vibrancy and help with the economic development that you're trying to accomplish.
What are you doing about parking in downtown?
We just built a several hundred vehicle parking garage in our downtown. That was completed a few years ago. We also have added a lot more parking to the public library that was recently redeveloped downtown. You know, there's always a need for more parking. I get that, and I totally understand it. But we also have done a lot in parking. We have more to do, clearly, but we're making progress.
Okay. Well, we've got, I don't know, a minute and a half left. Is there anything that you just want to tell people, get off your chest, and just kind of speak directly about, again, arts and culture? I mean, there's so many things that are going on. There's always something going on in Fairfax City.
I appreciate that. We have one of the things I love about the city of Fairfax in particular is our special events. We have the best special events, I think, bar none, in Northern Virginia, in the metropolitan region. Our 4th of July parade is one of the best, I think, anywhere. I've had several governors tell me personally it's the best parade in Virginia, so other jurisdictions eat your heart out. We just did a World Cup party downtown yesterday, a little warm. And then, of course, we're launching a new concert series downtown called TGI Fairfax, Rock the Block. And we start in 2 weeks, 2 weekends from this past weekend. And they're going to be monthly for now, and my goal is eventually that they're weekly. Hopefully it will benefit our restaurants and everyone else in town.
Scott, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you for joining us very much.
I appreciate it.
You're making me want to move back to Fairfax City.
I'd love to have you back.
Well, although the traffic did kind of get me. But my eldest, got a great education there.
That's great to know.
Again, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I need a job.
Necesito trabajo.
I would like to speak English better.
Me gustaría hablar inglés mejor.
I want to be a U.S. citizen.
Quisiera ser ciudadano de los Estados Unidos.
For over 35 years,
Por más de 35 años,
the Hispanic Committee of Virginia has been serving our community.
el Comité Hispano de Virginia ha estado sirviendo a nuestra comunidad.
Job training and placement,
Capacitación, ayuda para conseguir trabajo,
education for children and adults,
educación para niños y adultos,
immigration, naturalization, and medical referrals.
ayuda para los procesos de inmigración y naturalización y orientación sobre médicos
Are a small part of what we do.
son solo una pequeña parte de lo que hacemos.
For help, information, or to volunteer,
Para ayuda, información o para ofrecerse como voluntario,
contact the Hispanic Committee of Virginia,
comuníquese con el Comité Hispano de Virginia,
helping everyone participate more fully in American society.
ayudando a todos a participar plenamente en la sociedad norteamericana.
Hey, Lena, where's yours?
Would you notice if you were missing half your kidney function? According to the National Kidney Foundation, 20 million people have chronic kidney disease, and 20 million more may be at risk and not even know it. Anyone with high blood pressure, diabetes, or family history of chronic kidney disease is at risk. Early diagnosis is vitally important. To get the whole story, talk to your doctor and visit the National Kidney Foundation at kidney.org or call for a free brochure. Because when it comes to chronic kidney disease, you might not know the half.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Jeff Barnett. This is the Inside Scoop, and now we're talking with Rob Jackson, past president of the Fairfax County Federation of Civic Associations. Rob, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, Jeff, thank you much for the invitation. I enjoy being here, and well, I'm proud to be talking about the Federation.
Rob is a community activist bar none. He was named Lord of Fairfax in 2012. He's lived in McLean for, 25 years or so. Yep. Minnesota born, raised, University of Minnesota Law School. You're now of counsel with Marashlian and Donahue. We're telecom and tech law. And you were president, this is how I first met you, president of the McLean Civic Citizens Association for 5 years. Usually 1 or 2 years is more than enough for anybody, and you did that for 5 years, and then you moved on to the Federation, which is really kind of brings all these civic associations in Fairfax County together to have one voice to deal with the County Board of Supervisors, the Richmond, and the county staff. Is that pretty much right?
That's pretty much right. It's the umbrella organization was founded in 1940 as a nonpartisan organization, which it still is, and it's organized around the various homeowners associations, civic associations, and district councils in the county.
So if you're a homeowner or a rent or whatever, you're a citizen of Fairfax County, and you want to get the attention of the elected officials, and you want to get some allies in doing so, the civic associations and the Federation is the perfect place to go, right?
It works well. I think when the groups will band together and work hard, produce a good product, do some analysis. As you know, there's a lot of smart people in Fairfax County. We've got economists and engineers and scientists and lawyers, and so we can put out a pretty good work product. And I think a lot of times by working together with the staff or elected officials, we can solve problems early as opposed to dumping them on the lap of the supervisors or the General Assembly, and things, as you know, don't work as well at that point, and they're not happy to get the problems. We like to make sure that there's citizen input. Citizens can't, just like a neighborhood group can't control everything that goes on in its neighborhood, but it's important, I think, for there to be a voice, a place for people, whether they've lived here 50 years or they've just moved here last week, a chance to have some input into their community.
And you had a real impact on these residential units that the Board of Supervisors are considering in terms of zoning restrictions that would change things. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yes, residential studio units, single room occupancy or efficiency apartments, are an important part of the marketplace. They're a way for people with specialized needs, maybe elderly, people just out of school, a family that's broken up, a chance to do it. They've been amended the zoning ordinance in several cities around the state, and they've done it. Fairfax County came with a rather broad brush that the staff would have put them anywhere. Commercial, multifamily, low residential units, and there was a lot of concern that, this is an intense multifamily use. It really doesn't fit in single-family apartments. A lot of the people might not have cars, so it's important that it be near transportation so that they can get where they're going. There should be some neighborhood retail, there should be some open space, and basically, these concerns were expressed by the Federation and many of its members, and right now the Planning Commission has decided to put this on hold for more study. I think it's a good concept, but it has to be done right.
Yeah, again, let's talk about this a little bit. The residential studio units seem to be a kind of reaction to allow more young people and old people to stay in Fairfax County. But the market wasn't creating enough residential units for them.
Right.
And so the county thought that it would kind of adjust the zoning ordinances to facilitate the market to then create these RSUs. Right?
Right. I think that's a very fair statement, Jeff, of what happened. I think the problem came, and I don't mean to be overly critical of the staff, but they were talking to housing advocates and they were talking to developers, and you weren't getting broad enough input. And then you tell people that, okay, we're going to change your neighborhood. You know, somebody can go and subdivide a house and put, 2 or 3 units in there. It upset a lot of people. And it's the way to do things in Fairfax County is to engage the community. And we're a much more diverse community than we were when we moved here 20-some years ago, 25 years ago. But it's important to get people's thoughts, to find out what's going on, find out what their needs are. And I think that step sort of was skipped, and that's why it really didn't work. When the county engages the community, things work better. Same thing happened with the library plan. They were going to, library use changes. My kids who are college graduates and freshmen in college use the library much differently than I did. I mean, I was checking out books, they're doing stuff online, they're getting electronics, but there's still a lot of people who read books. And one of the things the Federation did was to sort of slow down a transformation to let's get rid of all the books and let's just be all electronic and drink coffee. And I mean, that's fine for some people, but you've got to have input. You've got to meet the needs of all the community. And I think that's another area where the Federation did some good work.
Yeah, I think anybody who's ever critical about the libraries should just go visit any library on any day and will be amazed as to how busy they are.
Very busy. When my son was a junior and senior at Langley High School, that's where he studied with his friends. They'd get a room and they'd have a study group at Dolly Madison Library, and that's how they studied.
So you were president of the McLean Citizens Association, which has been around for 100 years.
That's right.
About to have its centennial observance. And the Federation has been around for 70 plus years.
Almost 75. They were formed in 1940 and have been going strong ever since with ups and downs.
But they've been going strong because they have been a way for neighbors to get together. I mean, anybody can complain or can advocate their cause to a county supervisor and staff, and those people are very responsive.
Absolutely.
But it's a lot more impact when you're able to get your voice in concert with your neighbors.
Absolutely. Like, for example, the Mason District Council sponsored a meeting on code enforcement, which is a very important issue for all of us. And I attended as president of the Federation to support them. But it was important that there were groups from all over the Mason District. I mean, it wasn't just 5 people raising their concerns. It was people from all over asking questions, talking about areas where the county's doing a better job, talking about areas where they aren't doing such a good job. And I think that's important. They had some people there from Lee District where Supervisor Jeff McKay has been very active on code enforcement for his entire career in office. And because it's, people are saying, there's 8 cars parked in the side of the yard. What's happening in my neighborhood? Or somebody's running a business out of their garage. What's going on in my neighborhood? Because, again, it doesn't make a difference what your ethnic background is. Housing is expensive in Fairfax County, and people want to take care of it, and they like their neighborhoods, and they want to preserve the character of their neighborhoods. So it's good to get together with people and learn what they're doing, learn what your other people are doing, and work together, and early on in the process so that we do get better results.
Let's talk about what's going on in housing. The whole issue of residential taxes is kind of back on the burner.
Right.
You've been very involved with that. The Federation's been involved with it. Can you tell us what can we expect? What should we know about what's gone on, and what can we expect in the near term? What kind of decisions are going on?
Well, there's concern from a lot of aspects. One, the county, the schools need money. I mean, it's expensive. People do need services. We do want good schools. We want good parks. But on the other hand, we've seen a lot of stagnation in income. Federal employees haven't gotten a raise for years. They got a little one. My wife, I think her check went up after a health insurance premium, $7 for 2 weeks. I mean, that's the first raise she's had in years. A lot of people lost jobs at defense contractors. So it's a problem to sit and say, well, the county's wealthy. Well, there's a lot of income in the county. There's a lot of very wealthy people, but we've got a lot more people with coming in with getting lower wage jobs. The biggest growth is in the lowest tier. There isn't much growth at the higher end of jobs anymore. We've got a lot of people, young people who are struggling to get a good job. They've got a lot of debt. So there's a limit, and I think the supervisors sort of understand that there's a limit as to how much money you can get from residential real estate taxes. At the same time, the county does not. We're a Dillon Rule state. We're a strong Dillon Rule state, and the county.
I'm sorry. First, what is a Dillon Rule?
Dillon Rule is as a former Iowan. I lived there 5 years. Judge Dillon was an Iowa judge who set a rule that basically local government only has the power that is delegated them specifically by the state government. And we're a strong Dillon Rule state. And so there's some taxes the county can't impose, or they can't increase without permission from Richmond. Also the office market, the commercial market is very flat. While Arlington and Loudoun grew, Fairfax County was hit very hard by the downturn, the sequestration, and the downturn in government contracting, and actually commercial revenues are down. The goal of the county, I think, is to have 25% of the revenue coming from commercial real estate taxes. It hasn't been there since the 90s. So there's a push, as Mayor Silverthorne was saying, is a push for more commercial development. But on the other hand, you've got to balance that with traffic. I mean, and so it's complicated. There aren't simple solutions. So that's another reason why I've been engaged in civic affairs for years. Is I like to talk to people. It's quite possible to work out solutions with people who have very different views on issues when you work together and you try to get the facts. So. The county's, as you know, looking at a meals tax. They can impose it with a referendum. The last referendum was in 1992, and it was handily defeated. And I think Chairman Sharon Bulova read the handwriting on the wall pretty clearly. There is no consensus as to whether we should do it, how much it should be, what should the proceeds be earmarked for, or should they just be turned over to the Board of Supervisors, etc. So. There aren't any easy solutions.
Okay, we're going to keep talking about that, especially about the meals tax, and a couple of things like hot lanes and Dulles Rail. I'd like to talk about those also in the second half of our show. But now we're going to take a break for a couple of minutes.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folk, but for others, it might take a little more work. And for those who haven't started, there are still things you can do to catch up.
Oh, that is good news.
Like getting out from underneath past debt. And don't get wrapped up with high-interest credit cards.
Get you some eyes.
Be diversified with your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Your financial goals are not out of reach. The choice is clear. For a happy ending, choose to save.
Everyone with alcohol and drug addiction is in the same boat. With treatment, you can find solid ground. For drug and alcohol information and treatment referral for you or someone you know, call 1-800-662-HELP.
Dude, are you sure you want this tattoo? Because just do it.
Some mistakes in life are permanent. Like hearing loss. To learn how to protect your hearing, visit asha.org.
You've probably heard about heart disease, but did you know that it's the #1 killer of women nationwide? Heart disease claims more lives each year than breast cancer, lung cancer, or strokes combined. But there are steps you can take to protect yourself against it. For more information on how you can prevent heart disease, contact your local American Heart Association or visit their website at www.americanheart.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Jeff Barnett, and we're getting the Inside Scoop on local politics with Rob Jackson, the past president of the Fairfax County Federation of Citizens Association. And again, you name a local issue of impact to Fairfax County, Rob is more than conversant on it. He's an expert. We were talking about the meals tax just before the last break. Tell us how this will work. What is the tax rate that we're considering right now, and where are we on that decision process for that happening?
Okay. The meals tax is allowed under the Virginia Code with an approval by counties with the approval of their voters.
Like Arlington County has one.
Yeah,
right?
Actually, Arlington got a legislative exemption to avoid the referendum, but Fairfax County would like.
But they have the tax.
They have the tax. All the cities and towns have them. So from the standpoint that it's not something new. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be a competitive disadvantage to restaurants in Fairfax County, but a lot of them are saying, but there's pressure on us to increase wages for our employees, to keep prices down. So,
how much of a tax are we talking about?
They're
here?
proposing, besides the sales tax, would be an additional 2 to 4 cents. They hadn't made up their mind what it would be, and they hadn't made up their mind what it would be used for.
And who's they?
The Sharon Bulova set up a task force of citizens, business people, interest groups, and they really, the thought was maybe they could get it on the 2014 ballot, but if they did under state law, they basically would have had to have a decision, a final plan by now, and a petition before the circuit court. And they just didn't have consensus on this thing. So I think Chairman Bulova wisely decided, let's not rush this, let's take some more time, let's do some more research. And she didn't see it happening until earliest the 2016 elections, which would be under the new Board of Supervisors. We have supervisor elections in 2015, and we may see some new supervisors. And
why wouldn't we have this vote in the 2015 election cycle?
I think the thought was that it probably ought to let the new supervisors have some say into what's going on, and that's probably a good idea to do things. You can do always things with a lame duck board, but sometimes it's better to let the new people, if there are new people, have a shot at it. And I think it's also more time to try to reach consensus. Again, as I said earlier, when you have consensus in Fairfax County, things work pretty well. When you don't, it doesn't work well. I mean, it's a very activist county. There's a lot of smart people. A lot of people will object to things. So I think the supervisors want to do it where there's some support for this.
So it's your sense, your guess, your estimate that in 2016, Fairfax County voters will probably see an initiative on the ballot for meals tax of 2 to 4%.
I think so. I think they'll reach some consensus on this thing. They've got a long ways to go, and I can be proven wrong, but I think they'll reach consensus by then as to what's going on.
There's another tax that's also in the mill, and that's a BPOL tax, a business professional and occupational licensing. So I suppose that's people that are really working out of their homes would be the focus there?
Or any business. Any business has to pay it. It's a state law. It's a little bit problematic from the standpoint that it's a gross revenue tax. So someone who runs a successful business and making big profits and has the same amount of gross revenue as somebody who's starting out and has a lot of startup costs pays the same rate. There's a big difference in some of the rates. Some professions pay relatively low rates, some pay relatively high rates. I think that's an issue that should be looked at. And
what kind of rates are we talking about, do you know?
Oh, some are in the single figure percentage, some are maybe less 1%, 2% of gross revenue. Some at a lower level, it's a fixed fee. I think it's like $50 or $100.
But if I ran a gas station,
you'd be covered. You'd be covered on your gross revenues. Consultants are, real estate developers are, but there's some, and I don't know the facts, so I don't want to get into the specifics. I don't have them at my hand. They probably ought to look at whether there's more internal equity there. There's also a question.
Is this a new tax, or is this an increase of the present
tax? Yeah,
tax?
it's an increase of the present tax. It's also much lower, I've been told, than surrounding counties like Loudoun, Prince William, Arlington. So I think it's an issue to be looked at. A lot of what we just need to do is some good old economic growth. Would help. People getting more, getting wage increases, businesses making greater profits, people spending more, the sales tax revenues are down, everything was down but housing values. So it's not an easy job. But compared to civic activists, the supervisors do get paid something.
Well, like $17,000?
No, they get $75,000 now, I believe.
Do they?
Yeah, which is, I think is fair. I mean, they put in a lot more time than that. But I like to, every time one of them grouses at me, I like to remind them how much I've gotten paid as president of these various organizations. So. But people do this. I think they do. Most people do local government because they care about the community. I mean, there's some people see it as a stepping stone, but I think most of our supervisors and planning commissioners are really in it because they care about their neighbors.
Okay. If you're talking about economic growth, Tyson's comes up to mind.
Yes.
And then also transportation comes up to mind because
Right.
that's kind of an arterial blockage that we have for economic growth. So let's not talk way off in the future. Let's just talk, let's say the next 3 years or so. What can people expect in the Tyson's Corner area? Is it going to be is traffic and getting any better? Is a building boom about to start or peter off, or what's going on?
Well, I think Tyson's will, it's successful. I mean, it's a successful suburban office park, and a transition over 40 to 50 years to an urban center will have its starts and stops. But I think what we'll see is when the Silver Line opens up, we're going to see a new way to commute. We're going to see a rearranged bus system. We're going to, over time, see bike routes, pedestrian routes, some high-quality mixed development. There are some people who want to live, play, and work where they are, and Tyson's will be an interesting place. It's going to be an expensive place, but I think it will be successful over the long run. I really do. I think the plan that they adopted was reasonable. We're going to see more traffic, though. I mean, the county's going to see more traffic. You're going to see more traffic if they do some things in Annandale or if they do things on Route 1. I mean, the single occupancy vehicles are the #1 mode of transportation, in the county. Plus, Fairfax County's in between. I think Mayor Silverthorne mentioned that. We're in between. We've got Loudoun, we've got people coming from Maryland, we've got coming from Western Virginia, Southern Virginia, and a lot of them got to drive through Fairfax County. So I think Tyson's is starting to grow. I think right now it's residential. That's the hot item. Apartments or condos. I think it's going to be apartments for a while. I think there'll be more office space. People are hedging. Developers are hedging their bets. They have to respond to the market. And if it's residential, they'll build residential. If it's office, they'll build office. Important thing is that we increase the size of the residential population so that we have more people who are not driving there. I mean, right now there's about 18,000 residents and 106,000 workers. The goal over the next 30, 40 years is to bring that up to 100,000 residents and 200,000 workers. So
from 17,000 residents to 100,000 residents, and from 100,000 workers to
200,000. So I mean, we're going to see a lot of motor vehicles. But part of the growth is, once you hit 84 million square feet, and Tyson's is built about 47 million square feet now, you have catastrophic road failure. The Beltway shuts down, the toll road shuts down, 7 and 123 all shut down. So every new single occupancy vehicle trip after that has to be balanced by a non-single occupancy vehicle trip, bike ride, a walk, rail, bus. So, you know, we're going to see more transit. I think we're going to see more telework. I mean, I think that money spent on network security will allow the government to do more things with employees remotely, and I think that's, you know, that's a way of doing things. My wife's a supervisor for the federal government, and she still manages to work at home, you know, once in a while. I work at home a lot. So I think we're going to be a very different county, but we're still going to see a lot of traffic. And if you don't like traffic, you're living in the wrong place.
The Federation, you said before, has done a lot on libraries. It's done a lot on residential studio units, and this is in the short term. What do you see this Federation doing, focusing on over the next year or so?
Well, I think that it's a pivotal point, and I think my predecessor, Tanya Hussein, would say it's had a lot of these points in the past, and it has, and it will have in the future. I think it's a question of how do they stay focused on the homeowners versus some of the people who want to say, you know, the schools are most important. We need to be an entity supporting the schools, and which to me is, there are organizations that support schools or parks or that, you know, we need to keep the focus on the homeowners. Now that doesn't mean you want poor schools or no bad parks, or you want to, you know, cut the tax rate in half. But it's important, I think, to give homeowners a voice to government, because you know, business has the Chamber of Commerce, and we have the PTAs and the PTOs, and we have the Friends of the Libraries and the Friends of the Parks, and but who speaks up for the homeowners? And I think that's what the Federation and the homeowners associations, the district councils, organizations like the Great Falls Citizens Association, the Reston Citizens Association, South County Citizens Association, and my own McLean Citizens Association, I think they're there to try to be the voice for the homeowners. And I think it's an essential voice.
Okay. We just got about 30 seconds left. So are there any kind of last issues that we should bring up?
Well, no, I think it's a lot of, I would second the point that Mayor Silverthorne made about it's important to get our newer residents involved. It's important to, you know, bring people, you know, who, you know, maybe weren't born here. They need to be involved in the community too. It's their community, and I think we need to, you know, you need to bring volunteers.
Well, Rob, thank you very much for joining us. If people at home want to get involved in the local community, especially to focus on homeowners type issues, then contacting the Federation is one way, or your local civic association is the other. Rob, this has been a wonderful chat.
I enjoyed it, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
Okay, best of luck.